and how it caused all different kinds of major things to occur besides the separation of the landmass itself. Let's see here. I see Braylon and Chase, Joseph, Caitlin, Sarah. Because the heater's actually working for a change. I've bumped it down. I can bump it down a little bit more. Trust me, I don't want to sweat. It's gross.
I'm already sweating.
Well, I'll bump it down some more in just a second. I'm checking online attendance. I'm glad you put deodorant on too, Caitlin. That's a nice thing for you to have done. All righty, so for this opener, watch now it's going to be broken in the on position.
Oh.
Yeah, that would be bad.
Skipping class.
That would be bad. The only thing I can do, I think I can open the windows. I think. I've never even tried, to be honest with you.
Want to try opening the window?
No, we're not going to open it this second. I can open the door, though. They're closed. All right, so Pangea, posed by Vega there long ago. No, not that long ago, about 100 years ago. We had separate plates that collided together to make Pangea. It's not like it just started off as one big, massive thing that then broke up. It was bits that slammed in together. And the most recent supercontinent that existed, that's the one that we call Pangea. So if it's true, and you had individual smaller plates that slammed together, what would have been formed when they collided? That's the big thing. Mountains. You know which mountain chain?
The one overseas and like Asia.
No. No.
Underwater mountains.
No.
Europe has mountains.
Europe has mountains.
Is it there?
Part of them. Part of them's here.
The mountain range on the east.
That's it, the Appalachians. Appalachians are the older mountain range that are in our country, which did form when Gondwanaland and, well, a couple things actually merged together to make Pangea. We'll be talking about that between today and then tomorrow, I believe, is continental accretion, like how did the continents emerge? We'll get into mountain formation, and then I believe we are ending this week with the ice ages. I believe is how I tied it out. And I was working yesterday trying to finish everything up. Then we'll have next week, we'll have one on glaciers and how glaciers affect global climate. We're starting to get into that global climate change stuff. It's not human related, not yet. Then I want to say the last bit's volcanoes. Right now, I'm more tempted to do a documentary on Krakatoa versus Yellowstone. I'm watching a bunch of them, trying to figure out which one will tie in the best with what we're talking about right now. There's a lot of good ones that are all in that series that I've been going back to. There's 2 different series that I've been going back to. Thursday right now looks like it's a test review, and you guys know not this Friday, but next Friday is that remote day that they just sort of sprung on us. Like we have nothing to do with it. Like they just like, oh yeah, kids are going to be from home, and the parents are not going to be happy, and yeah, so that's supposed to be the 29th. Right now, that's I'm starting to go back. Right now, that test is slated for Friday the 29th. So it's still a fluid process, but right now that's what I'm looking at. All right, so Pangea did not always exist. There were little smaller bits that slammed together, and yes, at their merger, we had these huge mountain chains that went up a long time ago, and because of erosion, they're actually some of the smaller in height mountain ranges that we have. Once we had the merger with Pangea, something triggered it right up also, and some of those original plates actually popped completely back off like the way they originally were. They just had mountains attached to the sides of the mountain. But these continents are constantly in a back and forth motion. We very possibly and most likely will in the future have another supercontinent. And so we've got the rifting, we've got South America and Africa, we've got the West and the Eastern hemispheres that are pushing away, but eventually if they get to the other side, they should come back together again. We're just probably not going to be in existence to be able to witness it. We're a very, very, very fragile species. We need to make sure that I unmuted my microphone. I sure did. I don't see anybody else now. Back to presentation mode. All right, so the most recent supercontinent is Pangaea. There have been other Earths, other major things that have occurred before Pangaea. I might have some time to fit in, like the snowball Earth, which happened way before Pangaea, maybe in the next 6 weeks. I don't know. I've sort of planned out the entire year, and right now I don't have the major types of Earth built in any more specifically. I may be able to fit in bits of it so that we can at least discuss them. But Wegener, he was the one in 1912 came up with his theory of continental drift. We know that that's not right. You know, tectonics is real. But he was that first person that took a look at many different things to say, yeah, these used to all be put together a long time ago. Pangaea started to form at about 480 million years ago. The first major merger of these plates to create the bulk of Pangaea was about 300 million years ago. And that's about the age of, give or take, the Appalachian Mountains. Now, on the other side in Europe, and I have to go back and take a look at what they're called, but it's the same mountain range. They just got split. The continents moved apart, but the structure of those mountains, both in Europe and in Northern America, all the way up through Greenland, they're from the same structure. It's some of the oldest Earth that actually exists as far as the rock is concerned. It's Precambrian. So Pangaea started in the Permian after the Precambrian, and it lasted all the way through the majority of the Jurassic. And then it started to split back up again. And this is the end of the Cretaceous, is when we had that asteroid impact that wiped out a bulk of life. But this particular, I think there's one more, no, there's not. This particular breakup actually triggered a massive extinction. You okay, Tatum?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, the mountain cedar is still crazy. My poor kid was sneezing and coughing like crazy yesterday. I was like, check your temperature. I'm picked off. Well, like I said, it's right now the bulk of it is what they call mountain cedar, which is juniper. It surprised I'm not coughing and sneezing like crazy right now. I'm pretty sensitive to it. But anyways, all of the land, big land chunk is Pangaea, and then the massive ocean, which this literally translates to all of the water or all of the ocean, was Panthalassa. That was the other major part. In fact, this huge ocean, this ginormous ocean that existed for such a long period of time, absorbed so much solar radiation that it kept the planet a heck of a lot warmer than it is today. It's one of the reasons why the dinosaurs could flourish. They needed more oxygen, they needed more heat. We still are not 100% sure if they were warm or cold-blooded, but we're assuming that they were cold-blooded because the rest of the reptiles are. You sure you're okay, Katie?
Yes.
Okay.
You need to customize temperature.
No, I don't have my head scanner thermometer thing. It's at home on my counter. Huh? Oh, you need to go back? I'm sorry, yes. If it will go back. And I've gone back and I fact checked a lot of my dates. There's a lot of, they're in the same range that yes, this particular geological function happened during this time, but there's sort of wiggle room on either side of it. The further back in time we go, the more fuzzy our information becomes depending on what we're analyzing. Last week, I think it was last week, we were talking maybe the week before, how we analyzed the different isotopes of oxygen that let us know, was it a warm period or a cool period? Whether those oxygen isotopes were in the ice cores of Greenland and Antarctica, I can speak today, or if they recorded in the shelled remains of things like coral reefs, different crustaceans that were in the ocean at the time. There is a difference between the relationship of the 16 and the 18 oxygen in air, which is the ice, right, or in the bottom of the ocean, which is the water they flip-flop. Gondwana land or Gondwana, the ancient continent. This thing's been around for a really long time. It was before Pangea. It was just after Pangea. Then eventually it split up into South America, Africa, India, Australia, and Antarctica. And the other major continent before Pangea occurred was your American. After Pangea broke up, it was called Laurasia. And so there was a little bit of a shift in, I guess, their offspring, which are our current continents, what they turned into. But you had two major ancient supercontinents before Pangea, Gondwana and the Euramerican continent. They slammed together, created the Appalachian chain. Like I said, I have to go back and double check what it was called in Europe. I don't know all of my mountain ranges, unfortunately, I don't. And then eventually with Pangea, the way it split up, and it spewed the continents out different ways. Eventually along came India, and it slammed into the Eurasian continent, and that's what made the Alps. The Alps are actually one of the youngest mountain chains that are on the planet. That's why they're not the Alps. I apologize. The Himalayas. That's why they're the tallest. They haven't had enough time to erode. Plus, India was a fast-moving plate. So when it slammed into Eurasia, it had a whole heck of a lot of force. These continental plates had to go somewhere. They couldn't go down. They went up. We'll talk more about mountain formation on Thursday. Okay, so if you do not know how to spell them, it's
Just a reminder that homeroom is after third period. Thank you.
yeah, because it was crystal clear as mud this morning. So this was the original formation of the Appalachian Mountains. That's the eastern mountains. There's different parts. There's the Smokies. There's the blue. There's the green part. There's different sub-mountain ranges that make up the larger system, which we call collectively the Appalachian Mountain, which I grew up skiing on as a child. And so we had Gondwana land and Euramerica slammed together. Here came another one that was from the northern pole, the Angaren, and it slammed south into the top of the Euramerican plate. This happened about 270 million years ago. That's what MYA stands for. BYA would be billion years ago. If you see BP, that would be before presence. I've seen that time annotation before. I don't think I put that into my notes though. We had one more bit, Caphasia, that never actually joined with the rest of Pangea. It was sort of like an island off on the side. I should have an image. I'm almost positive I put it in with your Canvas notes of what Pangea looked like, because we can go back in time 270 million years ago and take a look at it. But as far as the records that we have, the different layers of rock, the different fossils, the original horizontality, the isotope dating, all of the stuff that we can do, we pictured out what Pangea would actually look like if it was around today. Pangea was about a third of Earth's surface. Now, it's what, 70% water now, 30% land, so there's really not that big of a difference in total land mass now. It's just spread out. Versus land mass of Pangea 250 plus million years ago. Everything keeps getting recycled. It is the constant theme on this planet. Everything gets recycled, whether it be the carbon cycle, the water cycle. The what?
Carbon and water recycle.
Well, we have the carbon. We do. We talked specifically about the rock cycle because obviously it's Earth's space. We'll eventually get into the water cycle, which you guys should have been exposed to that one point in time. I don't know the depth, but it's going to come back the way that the water is, whether it be rain, it goes down through the groundwater, it's in some type of a reserve. You guys probably did that in middle school, right? Aquatics, if you took aquatics. I just don't know how in depth you guys did it. I don't know how in depth we're gonna do it, but we do need to talk about it because that's part of the interaction between the hydrosphere, which is the water portion, and the atmosphere, which is the part that we breathe. So we just haven't gotten to that part yet. This is a representation of Pangea. We've got this would be the Euro-American plate up here. Okay, and then this Gondwana land is everything else that's down towards the south. This is eventually what turns into North and South China. This is the island part that never actually really physically attached to Pangea itself. But everything else was nothing but ocean. In the Jurassic, Pangea started to rift. So we had the Mid-Atlantic Ridge that's doing what the African ridge is doing in Eastern Africa right now, and it literally started to pull that supercontinent back apart. And so Gondwana popped back off the upper part or the lower part, and then instead of the Euro-American plate, it's now called Laurasia. When they started to open, when they started to separate, it created a large inland sea called the Tethys Sea. Obviously, that's not around anymore, but that was the first flood of the Panthalassa ocean water that started to fill in that gap between what you would think the northern and essentially the southern hemisphere. Eventually, Laurasia broke up into North America, our plate, and then Europe, Asia, Russia, that plate, which are the two largest plates that are actually on the surface of the planet. There's 8 major plates. Gondwana land broke into everything else. Gondwana land didn't really change much. It just sort of formed some mountains with these mergers of everything. That would have been, let's see, this breakup would have been anywhere between 30 and 200 million years before the breakup would have been the original merger, according to the information that we have from all the different rocks and the records. Some of the machines that they use to do the mass spectra analysis are actually really interesting. How much they can pull. You only move a certain amount, and that represents a year's worth of time. All right, first ocean to actually form was the Atlantic. It took time. The northern part, well, it says central. The northern and the southern part actually developed in 2 different times. The more northern part of the Atlantic Ocean developed first, and then the southern part developed second, almost 40 million years after. Eventually, we had a large enough rift where everything flooded, and we birthed the Atlantic Ocean. So, depending on how I ask the question, the ancient sea that formed first was the Tethys Sea. The original ocean that we have the records of was Panthalassa, but the first current ocean, the one that's still around today, to actually form was the Atlantic Ocean itself. The last one was the Indian Ocean. That one was way, 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 way later. We should be able to get through this fairly quickly, and I can double check, because I have people that missed the test on Friday. And she's not here again today. Well, please tell me you've got a tardy thing. You wait, are you supposed to be there now?
No, they don't need to go there.
You have to go tomorrow. Let's see what, I'm gonna have to double check on mine here in just a second. If that one's here. Okay, so Indian Ocean was the last one of the current ones. That was about 80 million years ago. The smaller Indian plate was a lot faster moving than most of the other plates. When it slammed into Eurasia, it was so much force that it lifted up the Himalayas, which are the tallest of the mountain ranges. That's where Everest is, the tallest mountain. They're newer. They haven't had as much time for rain and wind everything else that occurs down to organisms that are crawling on it, plants that are growing on the surface to erode it down. The more time that erosion has to take place, the more weathered down those mountains will become. I don't want to do another lesson on erosion and deposition. We've already done that. I may come back after this section and we may talk about some of them just to refresh you, but I don't want to do that entire lesson over again when we did that in the second, no, I think it was the third 6 weeks.
All right.
So like I said, the original ocean was Panthalassa. That was around Pangea time. When the two ancient continents started to separate with Pangea, that formed the Tethys Sea, and that's not around anymore, but the first major ocean to actually develop was the Atlantic. The last major ocean to develop would be the Indian. This is just, and you guys have seen this before. This is a representation as we're going from the oldest, 250 million years ago, the Permian. The breakup of Pangea actually triggered the most extensive extinction on the face of this planet, wiped out 95% of all life. Then we're going more recent in time, the Triassic. This is the beginning of the dinosaurs. There's that Tethys Sea right here that's opening up. The Jurassic is the heyday of the dinosaurs. That's what you think of with the movie. And we're having more and more and more separation that's occurring, that the Atlantic is starting to open up over here. The Cretaceous is the end of the heyday of the dinosaurs. And then we have our current configuration now. We talked about this before too. Wegener could see, just like a puzzle, the continents fit together. Took a look at very specific fossils, and we're going to talk about the 4 specific organisms today. What were their names? Where did they come from? Where were they connected across Pangea? Coal distribution in Antarctica. Some of the largest coal beds are found in both Siberia and Antarctica. Coal only develops with very warm, swampy, marshy type areas. Neither of those are like that now. That magnetic striping on the seafloor, this is the one that sort of put the nail in the coffin. But we didn't understand this until the 50s, if I'm remembering correctly. We just didn't have the technology to be able to see that magnetic north and south had changed. And then we see the remnants, they're called moraines. We'll get more into different terms with glaciers on Monday of next week, if I'm remembering the order that I'm doing it right. But South America, Australia, Africa, and put Africa on this list. I forgot to add them in there. They all have moraines, these leftovers of when a glacier pushes all the rock until it stops growing. And then when it retreats, it leaves that line of what we call till, the dirt, the rocks, the boulders that were pushed in the front. It's called a moraine. All of these countries had them, and there are no glaciers in those areas on these specific countries. There just were at one point in time. There are 4 critters you need to know about. Some of them we've talked about. 2 of them we have. The other 2 we have not. Synagnathus. This was a Triassic. Okay, this was the early part of the dinosaur age. It was connected between South America and Africa. That's this guy. That's this thing that almost sort of looks like a stumpy Komodo dragon. This thing couldn't swim. If it could, it couldn't do it for a long period of time, and yet it bridged the Atlantic Ocean. Lystrosaurus, which is the hippo dude, that's this guy. This was also Triassic. This is very, very, very early on, before Pangea started splitting it all. And this one went across Africa, India, and then down into Antarctica. Then we have the 2 that we talked about. That fern was everywhere. That was a major food source for the entirety of the dinosaurs, whether it be the early on ones, which was the Triassic, or even the pre-dinosaurs, the ones before them, like the Dimetrodon, they ate these things. They were everywhere. Completely widespread. And then the other one that we talked about before, the Mesosaur, or Mesosaurus, yeah, it was an aquatic marine reptile, but it wasn't like a plesiosaur. It wasn't an ocean swimmer. It just sort of hung out in the marshes and the swamps. So sort of like an alligator, but didn't look like it. Didn't have the ability to swim very, very, very long distances between the continents. Once again, SA is South America. I'm just abbreviating so I can fit everything on here. But we talked about these two guys last semester when we were doing fossils towards the very end of the 6 weeks. All right, the thing that we don't have a record for, at least not very much at all, short of coral, is that first major ocean. We do have records along the continental shelf of Pangaea, but we don't really have anything from deep within the ocean itself. Tons and tons and tons of coral fossils. In fact, the ones that I ordered that came in that I still haven't built anything with it, I don't know if I'm going to be able to because of COVID, there are lots of fossils of the different types of coral that were in the reef. And we've said this before, the life started in the ocean. It didn't start on land. It was way more abundant for a very long period of time until Pangaea started to split apart. And then that triggered the Permian extinction, which wiped out 95% of all marine life, over 70% of all land life. The largest mass extinction that our planet, to our knowledge, that our planet has actually experienced. I'll eventually do a lesson on mass extinctions in the last section of this 6 weeks, when we do evolution of life. The other major things that were alive right now, and it's true in my, the little kits that I got, there are so many different types of brachiopods. There's some that are the bigger ones that, if you paid attention to the images of the fossils that I was showing, whether it be through the notes or on the test, it almost looks like a winged, like a fan. That's a brachiopod. The ammonites are sort of what you think of as a classic snail shell, a circular one, but the organism actually looked more like a squid that would peek out the other side, the opening of that snail shell. Extremely common in this time. In fact, these two organisms, even with mass extinctions, they kept coming back. There were a couple of major things that occurred because of this breakup. Primitive fish started giving away to ones that had true spines. The whole vertebrate thing started shifting. Sharks, the most common fossil that you can find from the ocean are the teeth from sharks, because they were unbelievably prevalent, and sharks are continuously replacing their teeth. They don't ever stop creating new ones. But the whole backbone thing started occurring at this time. And I'm talking about like as Pangaea was forming, very, very, very early. The Carboniferous plants, that's where most of the huge deposits of coal come from. They started being replaced with plants that not only made seeds, like true seeds, but also had what we consider true vasculature, the xylem and the phloem. I don't know how well you remember any of this stuff from biology, but primitive plants like mosses, it's water wicking. They don't actually pump the water through their cells like they do with more modern plants. The gymnosperms, that was a crucial change with plant life. They didn't have to stay as close to water sources to be able to move the water from one point of the plant to the other. It's almost like arteries and veins, but it's not blood, it's water. And I don't know how well your biology teachers explain that to you with plants, but it was a crucial, crucial change with being able to get plants to go further inland and further away from their water source. Land animals, I said we had the backbone, the vertebrates, they started moving on land. So It didn't start off bipedal. I mean, you think of like a T-Rex that are just sort of like us with their little hands in the front. But your theropods, your like the 4 feet down, the Dimetrodon is probably the one that if I put a picture of it up here, you would recognize it. It has the big sail that goes down its back. But the thing that was interesting about it is when they analyzed the skull of this organism, the way that its jaw is put together and the way that its teeth are actually arranged in the head is actually more mammalian than it is reptilian. And these are early pre-dinosaur type organisms. It wasn't until like I said, the Dimetrodon was, I don't even think I'm going to have to go back and double check the actual extinction of that particular species, how far into the Triassic it went. But it wasn't around when like T-Rex was running around and the Brontosaurus and Diplodocus and all of those were running around. Very early stage. Right, the Permian extinction about 250 million years ago wiped out almost all the life on this planet, almost all the marine life. Those brachiopods and those ammonites, they came back. They kept coming back for a long time, actually. Acid rain. There was a monstrous volcanic eruption at this time in Siberia. Enough where nothing lived up there. Like, it changed the entire planet. And it was the breakup of Pangea that actually rifted the planet, allowed all the magma to come up, and just completely and totally changed the temperature of the planet. And it cooled everything off so, well, it did both. It cooled and it warmed. But when a volcano erupts, the gases, and I'm sort of like jumping all the way to the last one that we're going to be doing. I'm not trying to do that, but the gases that volcanoes emit, the sulfur dioxide specifically, is the one that creates the acid rain. It interrupts the life in the ocean and it changes its colors. Now, I don't know how they know it turned the ocean pink, because the algae blooms nowadays turn the ocean red, call it a red tide. I swear, if you took aquatics, you've heard that phrase before.
Yes.
I don't know how they say that it turned it pink unless it's a specific type of algae, which I did not look into. It also released methane gas. Methane gas is a greenhouse gas and it increases the temperature of the planet. It's locked. They're all locked. Hold on, I gotta figure out where my password. It's regular time in first period.
Like 20.
Yeah. I know everybody's up. She's a great presence. They catch you without a pass. They go insane. Don't leave it in the bathroom. And so we had all these things going on. We had massive increases in temperature. And it pretty much baked the planet. Now, in the oceans, okay, and smaller things had a better chance of living than your larger things that depended on more plant material or the flesh of other organisms if they were carnivorous in order to survive. But this particular extinction was the third mass extinction that we have record of. The first mass extinction, and I don't remember if I put it on this one or not. I don't think I did. The first mass extinction was from 2 billion years ago, a little bit more than that, actually. Then we had the snowball Earth, which was about 650 million years ago. And there was another one in there too. There was the Permian extinction, which was about 250 billion years ago. And then there was the Cretaceous extinction from about 65 million years ago. And that's the one that the asteroid slammed into the planet and triggered essentially nuclear winter. But if it wasn't for the Permian extinction, which wiped out a bunch of stuff, then we wouldn't have had the dinosaurs, the reptiles, and early mammals, and the birds, for that matter, start to evolve. And if it wasn't for the Cretaceous extinction that happened after this one, then we wouldn't be here. So our planet has been through all different kinds of catastrophic disasters, but at the same time, if it wasn't for that disaster occurring, life as we know it today would not be here. We actually can thank volcanoes a lot for our presence on this planet. Because if it wasn't for volcanoes billions of years ago, pumping all those gases into the atmosphere from the interior of the Earth, we wouldn't have had life triggered to begin with 3.5 billion years ago. So that's the last one that I have on today. A lot of these are shorter than what you guys are used to. I need to double check. And I sent out, if you missed the test on Friday, I sent out an email. I don't know if it was yesterday, if it was the day before. Let me see. Let me stop this. I need to double check online.